The first police officer took hold of my arm before the priest finished saying my father's name. At first I thought he had mistaken me for someone else. Then a second officer stepped behind me and said quietly, "Mr. Whitaker, we need you to come outside." I looked at his hand on my sleeve, then at the walnut coffin 10 feet away. My father was inside it. "Come outside for what?" "We need to speak with you about a security concern." "No." The chapel went quiet. Nearly 200 people had come to bury Walter Whitaker, former Stonebridge procurement director, Little League coach, church treasurer, and the man who had raised me alone after my mother died when I was 12. I was standing beside his coffin with the eulogy folded in my hand, and 2 Stonebridge police officers were trying to remove me from his funeral. I looked toward the front pew. My wife did not look surprised. Mayor Laura Whitaker sat beside her senior advisor, Adrian Locke, wearing the same controlled expression she used for budget votes, storms, layoffs, and election night speeches. "Laura, tell them to let go." Her mouth tightened. "Nathan, please cooperate." My sister Emily stood so quickly her chair scraped the floor. "What the hell is happening?" The officer lowered his voice. "Sir, don't make this harder." Harder than dragging a man away from his father's coffin? Phones came up throughout the chapel. Laura noticed them too. She stood and stepped into the aisle. "Nathan, just go outside for a minute. You knew they were coming. Not here. It's Dad's funeral. Where else would you like to discuss why your police department is touching me?" Adrian rose beside her. That was when I understood why. My father had asked for one thing after my eulogy, a 3-minute video he recorded 12 days before he died. Cancer had taken nearly 50 pounds from him, but it had not softened his voice. In that recording he explained why he believed something was wrong with Harbor East, the $92 million redevelopment project Laura had made the centerpiece of her second term. Harbor East was supposed to bring affordable apartments, retail, a riverfront park, and hundreds of construction jobs to Stonebridge. Adrian had promoted it everywhere. My father had spent 31 years in city procurement. 6 months earlier, an old colleague showed him an email chain suggesting that confidential bid-scoring information had reached people connected to Northmark Urban before final proposals were locked. Adrian's private account appeared in the chain. Dad never claimed bribery. He never claimed the wrong bidder had won. He simply wanted the city to establish how non-public scoring material moved outside the proper process. Laura told me an internal review was already underway. 3 weeks became 5. 5 became 8. Every answer sounded temporary, preliminary, incomplete, no evidence of material impact. Dad grew weaker while Adrian kept appearing on television beside renderings of Harbor East. One night in the hospital Dad told me, "They're waiting for me to die." I told him he was being dramatic. He gave me the exhausted look he reserved for people who mistook politeness for stupidity. "Nathan, I worked in government too long to confuse delay with uncertainty." Then he recorded the video. Laura knew I intended to play it. I had told her 2 nights earlier. She asked me not to. Not at the funeral. It's his request. There's a live stream. Clips will be everywhere before we leave. Then answer the facts. Her composure had cracked. "You have no idea what this could do." To Adrian? To the city. At the time I believed she meant the project. Now 2 officers were holding me while Adrian stood beside her. I looked directly at him. "You told her I was going to play it." "Nathan, this isn't the place." "That sounds familiar." Laura stepped closer. "Please stop. Why are police here?" She didn't answer, so I asked the officer. "What were you told?" He hesitated. "We received information concerning a potential disturbance and a credible threat toward a city official." Emily said, "What threat?" The room broke into whispers. I looked at Adrian. "Did you tell them I threatened you?" Laura answered before he could. "You sent messages saying you were going to expose Adrian publicly today. That isn't a threat of violence." "I didn't say violence. The officer just said credible threat." Laura's eyes moved toward the phones recording us. "Take him outside." Her tone had changed. No longer my wife asking me to cooperate. The mayor giving an instruction. The officers moved me forward. I put my eulogy on Dad's coffin because I didn't want it crushed in my hand. That image stayed with me afterward more than the shouting. White pages against dark wood, my hand shaking above them. I stopped beside Laura's pew. "Dad asked for that video to be played." "I know. If it disappears, I'll know exactly who was afraid of it." Adrian finally spoke. You're making a serious accusation. No. My father did. The officers guided me down the aisle. When I slowed, one tightened his grip and the other took my second arm. That became the photograph everyone saw later, my jacket twisted, an officer on either side, Emily crying behind me, Dad's coffin in the background, Laura standing beside Adrian. Outside, more officers waited. No handcuffs. No arrest. No charge. The lieutenant told me I could not re-enter until the security concern was resolved. Am I detained? No. Am I under arrest? No. Then I'm going back inside. He stepped in front of me. Sir, I need you to remain here. Reverend Cole had followed us outside. I asked whether the church requested police assistance. His face changed. No. I did not. The lieutenant looked uncomfortable. My phone buzzed. Emily. Laura stopped the service. Adrian is at the media laptop. Then another message. He's taking it. The laptop controlled the memorial slideshow and live stream. Dad's video was queued on it. I called her. Don't fight him. What? I have another copy. Dad's paranoia had finally become useful. The original file was on an encrypted drive at my office, with another copy in cloud storage. Adrian could remove one laptop. He could not erase Dad. I turned toward the lieutenant. You pulled me out so Adrian Locke could take my father's video. That is not why we're here. Then let me back in. I can't do that yet. For half a second I wanted to push past him. It would have felt justified. It also would have given the city exactly the scene it had apparently expected. Mayor's husband confronts police at funeral. Instead I stepped back and called Maya Brooks, the attorney who had represented my engineering firm in a contract dispute 3 years earlier. She answered on the second ring. Nathan? Stonebridge police just removed me from Dad's funeral. A pause. Start again. No time. There's a video Dad wanted played about Harbor East. Adrian is taking the laptop. Do you have another copy? Yes. Good. Were you arrested? No. Charged? No. Did you threaten anyone? No. Any messages they could twist? I told Adrian, you won't hide behind Laura after Dad is buried. That's aggressive. By itself it's not a threat. Preserve everything and do not post anything. I wasn't going to. Then get the church recording before somebody else does. I looked at the cameras mounted inside the chapel. The funeral had been streamed through 3 fixed angles with a ceiling microphone over the aisle. Reverend Cole confirmed the archive saved automatically. Who has access? Me and our media volunteer. He hesitated. The mayor's communications office also got temporary access yesterday to coordinate security and the live stream. Revoke it. He did. The service resumed 17 minutes later without me and without Dad's video. I stood across the street while the hearse left the church. That was when I finally cried. Maya arrived soon afterward. She didn't waste time telling me how awful the situation was. She asked what needed preserving. Church feed. Police dispatch. Body cameras. Supervisor communications. Mayor's office messages involving today. She nodded. Anything else? The city statement, if they issue one. Laura was waiting beside her SUV. Adrian was no longer near her. For the first time all day, she looked like my wife instead of the mayor. I didn't know they would physically pull you out. That doesn't help. I told security there might be a confrontation. Because I was going to play Dad's video. Yes. You chose Adrian's problem over Dad's funeral. I was trying to stop this from turning into a spectacle. You created the spectacle. She flinched. I removed my house key from my ring and placed it in her hand. What are you doing? You can stay at the mayor's residence tonight. Nathan, don't do this now. You already did this now. Her eyes filled. I'm sending Dad's video somewhere you can't control. Where? I haven't decided. Reporter. State Ethics Office. Bond Authority. Council. Maybe all of them eventually. What mattered was that the video was leaving the private argument Laura thought she could contain. Before I reached Maya's car, my phone buzzed with a city press release. Earlier today, Stonebridge police responded to a credible security concern involving threatening communications directed toward a senior city official. Officers acted independently to prevent escalation. Mayor Whitaker did not direct operational police decisions. I read it twice. They're saying she didn't direct it. Maya scanned the statement. Can they prove that? Reverend Cole called before I could answer. Nathan, I revoked the communications office access. Good. But somebody downloaded the full funeral archive 11 minutes before I changed the password. Which account? The temporary mayor's office account. Maya looked at me. Then Emily sent a photograph taken just before Adrian removed the laptop. Laura stood near the sacristy door, pointing toward the police lieutenant. Above them hung the ceiling microphone. Her message read, "I think the mic caught everything." The city had just made Laura's denial official. Now I needed to know what the recording said. At 2:14 that afternoon, Maya, Emily, Reverend Cole, and I sat in the church media room while the archived funeral video played on a large monitor. I had expected chaos. What I got was clarity. The recording began 12 minutes before the officers approached me. Laura sat in the front row while Adrian leaned toward her. Their first conversation was too quiet to make out, but Laura eventually walked toward the side aisle where the police lieutenant was waiting. The ceiling microphone caught her. "Is Nathan still planning to play the file?" "Yes, ma'am. That's what Mr. Locke told us." Laura lowered her voice. "I don't want a confrontation inside." The lieutenant asked, "Has your husband threatened Mr. Locke?" "He sent messages." "What kind?" Adrian answered. "He said I wouldn't hide behind the mayor after Walter was buried." The lieutenant replied immediately. "That's not a criminal threat." Maya glanced at me. The recording continued. Laura said, "Can you keep him from taking over the service? The church controls the service. If he plays that video, there will be reporters outside before we leave. That's not a police matter." Then Adrian said something partly covered by the organ. We caught only the end, security concern beyond that message. The lieutenant asked for specifics. The music swallowed Adrian's answer. Laura spoke next. "Just get Nathan outside before the video plays." Maya stopped the recording. Emily stared at the screen. "Release it." "Not yet." She turned on me. "Why?" "Because the moment this goes public, everyone involved stops writing honestly." I had spent 18 years running an engineering consultancy. The first hours after a crisis were often the only time records still reflected what people actually thought. Once lawyers and communications teams took control, every sentence became careful. Maya agreed. For the next 4 hours we preserved first and spoke later. She sent formal notices to the city attorney, police department, mayor's office, Adrian, and communications staff. Reverend Cole locked the original church archive and access log. I made 2 verified copies. Then I went to my office and opened Dad's encrypted drive. I had watched his video before, but grief had made me listen emotionally. This time I listened for facts. "My name is Walter Whitaker. I worked for the city of Stonebridge for 31 years, 21 in procurement." He explained the Harbor East scoring process, Northmark Urban, and the confidential spreadsheet. He held up a printed email showing the document moving through an internal chain. The sender was D. Merrick. I had barely noticed the name before. Dad continued. "Mr. Locke may have an innocent explanation. If so, he deserves the opportunity to give it. What the city should not do is ask the public to accept a conclusion while withholding the communications needed to evaluate it." Then he said something Laura had never told me. I asked Mayor Whitaker directly whether the city would release the relevant emails after its internal review. She told me yes. Dad looked exhausted. That promise was made 43 days ago. I froze. Laura had personally promised disclosure. If this video is being played, I assume I did not live long enough to learn whether she kept it. My phone rang. "Laura." I let it stop. A message followed. "Please talk to me before you do anything. Adrian has been suspended." The administration was already moving. Maya called a minute later. City announced his suspension pending review of his role in the funeral security response. Police chief announced his own internal review. "Do they know we have the audio?" "Not from me." The city website had already replaced its original statement with a new one saying Laura welcomed an independent review. The sentence claiming she never directed police had simply disappeared. I called her. She answered immediately. "Why did you promise Dad you would release the Harbor East emails?" She went quiet. "You watched his video?" "Yes." "Did you publish it?" "No." Her relief was obvious. "Why not?" "I'm still deciding what matters more than making you panic." "Nathan. Why did you stop the video?" Laura took a long breath. Harbor East financing was 48 hours from final bond approval. So, if Walter's video went public before the closing, lenders could freeze. Then let them ask questions. Northmark had $27 million invested. 600 construction jobs were scheduled to begin next month. None of that explains police. I thought I could delay the video one day. There it was. Until the money closed. Yes. And then release the emails? Yes. Dad waited 43 days. I know. He died waiting. Her voice cracked. I know. I asked what Adrian had done that she hadn't. She hesitated. He gave police information I had not approved. What information? He showed me a message from you. The missing portion of the church audio. What message? Laura recited it. If Dad goes into the ground before you answer for this, I'll put you there with him. I stood. I never wrote that. Nothing from her. Where did you see it? Adrian showed me a screenshot the afternoon before the funeral. Did you verify it? No. Did he give it to police? I think so. Now we had a second problem. Laura had still ordered my removal to stop Dad's video. The recording proved her motive. But someone had apparently altered or invented a message that made the security justification sound much stronger. I told Maya. She sent a second preservation notice specifically identifying the alleged text. At 6:38 she called back. The city attorney acknowledged our hold request. Then someone from the mayor's communications office sent me a document anonymously. What? A draft of the press statement. The one they released after the funeral? Yes. What about it? It was created yesterday at 4:52 p.m. I stopped moving. Before the funeral. Before police approached me. Before any disturbance could possibly have occurred. Maya read the draft aloud. Stonebridge police responded today to a credible security concern involving threatening communications directed toward a senior city official. Officers acted independently to prevent escalation. Mayor Whitaker did not direct operational police decisions. Word for word. Metadata showed it had been circulated to the communications director, chief of staff, and Laura. The city had prepared its explanation before the event it supposedly explained. I drove to Maya's office. She had the file open when I arrived. Could be contingency language, she said. For an event Laura planned? That is the question. The next morning Channel 8 published the threatening screenshot after Adrian's lawyer gave it to them. My supposed message appeared in a green SMS bubble with a timestamp of 11:42 p.m., 2 nights before the funeral. Within an hour, the public conversation changed. Some people still saw a mayor silencing her husband. Others saw an angry man who had sent something that looked like a death threat. Emily called furious. Tell them it's fake. I need to prove it's fake. Maya already had the beginning of that proof. My carrier records showed no outgoing SMS to Adrian at 11:42. None before or after it either. The genuine text I had sent him the following morning was the one the lieutenant had quoted at the church. You won't hide behind Laura after Dad is buried. Aggressive, but real. We released both records together. Maya was careful in the statement. The carrier data proved the screenshot could not be an accurate image of an SMS sent from my number at the displayed time. That was enough to put the burden back where it belonged. I met Laura at Dad's house that afternoon. A thick blue binder sat on the dining table. What is that? Harbor East financing. She opened it to a certificate bearing her signature. The city represented that, to the mayor's knowledge, there was no unresolved material procurement irregularity reasonably expected to invalidate the award or impair the city's authority to proceed. I looked at her. This is what you were protecting. The project. Your signature was part of the project. She sat down. Yes. The answer explained more than her speeches had. Dad's video didn't merely threaten Adrian. It raised questions about a financing representation Laura herself had signed. Did you know the certification was false? No. Her answer was immediate, and I believed she believed it. Then why were you afraid? Because a lender can pause even when the legal answer eventually favors you. Harbor East had already survived years of litigation, zoning fights, and financing changes. I thought one more delay could kill it. She pushed another document toward me. An internal memo from Deputy Finance Director Denise Merrick concluding that the confidential data exposure was unlikely to have altered Northmark's ranking. D. Merrick. The name from Dad's email chain. She helped write the materiality memo? I asked. Yes. And she was involved in moving the scoring spreadsheet internally? She said she only forwarded it to Adrian for a mayoral briefing. Did anyone remove her from the review? Not entirely. For the first time, I understood Dad's refusal to accept the city's answer. The review did not have to be fabricated to be compromised. Someone connected to the movement of the confidential document had helped support the conclusion that the problem was not material. Laura had accepted that distinction because it kept Harbor East moving. Dad had not. Before I left, she admitted one more thing. The pre-written funeral statement had been ordered by her. I told Camille to prepare language in case police had to intervene. Before I did anything. Yes. Because you already intended to stop the video if I played it. Yes. There was no point shouting. The documents were louder. By evening, the State Bond Authority froze Harbor East financing pending review. The 24 hours Laura had tried to buy were gone. Then Adrian made his next move. He announced an on-camera interview and sent Dad's video, the Merrick memo, and several Harbor East emails to the state authority himself. The man Laura suspended had stopped trying to save her administration. He was preparing to survive its collapse. Adrian's interview began at 4:26 the next afternoon. He sat beside his attorney with no city seal behind him and said he had made mistakes but would not become a convenient scapegoat for decisions made by the mayor. Then he said something I had learned only hours earlier. Mayor Whitaker knew Harbor East had unresolved procurement concerns before the financing closed. True. She was not protecting me at the funeral. She was protecting that closing. Also true, at least partly. Then he held up his phone. If the mayor intends to blame me for the security decision, I will provide the complete communications showing exactly what she instructed us to do. Laura called while he was still speaking. I declined. Adrian released selected messages 20 minutes later. A group thread showed Laura, Adrian, Chief of Staff Camille Ross, and the mayor's security liaison discussing Dad's funeral the day before. Laura. Walter's video cannot become tomorrow's story before Harbor East closes. Find a lawful way to prevent a disruption. Camille responded. Church controls program. Police can only act on security grounds. Adrian. There is a security issue. Nathan's messages are escalating. Laura. Send security what you have. Then, 4 hours before the funeral. Adrian. If Nathan tries to hijack the service, officers need to move him before the file plays. Laura. Agreed. No scene inside. Maya read the thread twice. He gave them enough to bury Laura. But he didn't release the screenshot itself. You think that matters? I think he wants everyone looking at what Laura did after he introduced the threat, not at how the threat was created. That distinction did not save her. She had approved my removal. But it meant Adrian was curating evidence, not confessing. At 5:40, the state formally suspended Harbor East bond approval. That was the first thing Laura could not reverse with a statement. The financing deadline she had sacrificed Dad's funeral to protect no longer existed. At 6, she held a press conference. She admitted directing security to prevent me from playing the video and said she had relied on a threatening message she now had reason to believe was not authentic. A reporter asked whether she would resign. No, Laura said. The room erupted. She waited. Stonebridge deserves a full accounting before another rushed decision. I am temporarily delegating direct oversight of police liaison and Harbor East procurement matters while outside counsel reviews what occurred. It was politically unsatisfying, but at least she had stopped pretending officers acted independently. 10 minutes after the press conference, my phone rang from an unknown number. Nathan Whitaker? Yes. My name is Elise Morgan. I used to work for Adrian Locke. Maya was already reaching for a legal pad. Elise said, I watched Adrian make the screenshot. The room seemed to narrow. When? The night before the funeral. Where? The campaign office annex. What did you see? He had your real text open and used a screenshot editing app. He changed the wording and timestamp. Why were you watching? He asked me to help crop it for a security briefing. I thought it was a mock-up showing how the message might be interpreted. Can you prove what he did? Yes. Her phone automatically saved screen sharing sessions when she handled Adrian's remote media prep. He knew the sessions were recorded. She still had the file. Maya gave her a secure upload address. Then Elise said something that changed the shape of Adrian's role completely. He knew Laura was going to fire him after Harbor East closed. I looked at Maya. How? I printed a draft staffing memo 3 days before the funeral. The mayor planned to restructure senior staff after financing. Adrian's position was being eliminated. Why? Harbor East. She'd lost confidence in him. Adrian had known he was about to become expendable. Elise remembered him saying Laura planned to use him to get the project closed, then act as though removing him solved everything. What did that have to do with me? He said if she was going to make him carry Harbor East, she needed to own the decision too. What decision? The funeral. Elisa's voice became quieter. He knew Laura was afraid Walter's video would freeze financing. He kept pushing her to be the person who ordered whatever stopped it. The forged threat was not primarily about making me look violent. It gave Adrian the tool he needed to make police involvement feel defensible, and police involvement gave him leverage over Laura. If she later fired him, he could show she had personally joined the suppression. Elisa's screen recording arrived while we were still talking. It showed Adrian's phone, my genuine message, the editing interface, the changed words, and the altered timestamp. Maya did not release it. She preserved the metadata and sent it to the appropriate outside investigators. I called Laura. I know why Adrian did it. You found something? You were planning to fire him. She went quiet. Yes. He knew. Another pause. He couldn't. He did. 3 days before Dad's funeral. Laura sounded genuinely stunned. I told her about Elise and the recording. After a long silence she said, he kept asking me whether I would personally authorize removal if you disrupted the service. Why didn't that bother you? I thought he was afraid of you. Because of the screenshot. Yes. It worked because the story he gave her was useful. Laura already wanted Dad's video delayed. Adrian gave her a reason to tell herself that using police served safety rather than politics. I need the recording, she said. No. If he fabricated evidence. The city can request it through Maya. I'm still mayor. That's why you don't get it from me. She stopped arguing. By sunset, their responsibility had separated cleanly. Adrian fabricated evidence and used it to push police intervention while protecting himself from an expected firing. Laura wanted the video suppressed because she feared what it would do to Harbor East and her financing certification. He created a false threat. She made the decision. Neither could transfer his or her part to the other. That should have simplified the scandal. Instead, one question remained. If Laura had already lost enough confidence in Adrian to plan his removal, what had she learned about Harbor East before the funeral? When I asked, she resisted for less than a minute. There was another email. What email? Adrian to Northmark's development director. What did he say? That he could get her the scoring weights before final revisions. I stared at her. You knew that before you signed the financing certificate? No. When? 2 days after. The timeline shifted. Laura had signed while relying on the Merrick materiality memo. 2 days later, City Legal showed her an email that made Adrian's conduct look far worse than she had understood. What did you do? I removed him from procurement discussions immediately. And told lenders? No. Why? I wanted legal to determine whether the leak changed the award. Meanwhile you planned to fire Adrian after closing. Yes. She had not discovered the scandal before signing. She had discovered it afterward and then decided disclosure could wait. That was the real choice at the center of everything. The funeral was not where Laura first chose Harbor East over transparency. It was simply where that choice became impossible to hide. Where is the email? City Legal. Did Dad know? No. That hurt more than I expected. Dad had died believing the city was delaying because it still did not know enough. Laura had known something more serious for days. She had still tried to stop his video. Release it. I can't simply dump an investigative email. Then put it in the hands of someone who can lawfully decide what gets released today. Nathan. Dad waited 43 days. Don't use procedure to buy a 44th. The next morning Laura did something she had refused to do while Dad was alive. She gave up control. She instructed outside municipal council and the city clerk to evaluate the relevant Harbor East communications for immediate release, waiving confidentiality claims over her own mayoral communications. The records would not be selected by her press office. They would come out together. When the first batch posted that afternoon, I understood why Dad had been so angry. The scandal was both less dramatic and more serious than people had imagined. No suitcase of money. No secret ownership. No criminal mastermind. Just a senior advisor deciding the rules were flexible when the outcome mattered enough. And a mayor deciding disclosure could wait when the project mattered enough. The released Harbor East records were 47 pages long. By the time the city website stopped crashing, thousands of people had already downloaded copies. The first key email came from Denise Merrick. She had forwarded an internal scoring spreadsheet to Adrian because he was helping prepare a mayoral briefing on the expected strengths of the final bids. That explained how Adrian obtained it. It did not explain what he did next. He sent a cropped version to Karen Voss, Northmark Urban's development director. His message read, "This should help you understand where the committee is putting weight. Tighten your housing delivery section before final submission." Karen replied, "Very helpful. We'll adjust." Dad had been right. Confidential scoring information reached the bidder before final revisions. The records did not show Laura on that chain. She had not been copied, had not forwarded anything, and there was no evidence she knew before the procurement award. That mattered. Then came the later emails. 2 days after Laura signed the financing certification, City Council sent her Adrian's message to Karen Voss under the subject line, "Potential procurement integrity issue, Harbor East." Laura replied 11 minutes later, "Freeze any further sharing. I want Adrian removed from all procurement discussions immediately. Determine whether this changed the award." 34 minutes later came the line that defined her decision. "Do not notify lenders until legal determines materiality. We cannot destabilize financing based on an unresolved process issue." There was no need for anyone to explain what she meant. She learned the process had been compromised, acted internally against Adrian, and chose not to disclose externally until she knew whether the improper assistance changed the winning bid. Then Dad's emails appeared. "You promised disclosure. Materiality is not yours to decide after the fact if the bidding process was compromised." Laura answered, "Walter, give me until closing. If legal finds the award should be reopened, I will stop it." Dad responded, "After closing is not disclosure. It is confession under financing." I read that line 3 times. Laura had never shown me those emails because they made Dad's objection impossible to dismiss as an old procurement officer being overly rigid. He understood the conflict clearly. Laura believed Harbor East was good for the city. She believed Northmark may still have submitted the strongest proposal. She wanted to establish whether the unfair information changed the result before risking the financing. Dad believed the people supplying the money had a right to know the process had been compromised before they committed it. Those positions were not equally defensible once Laura began using public power to delay the truth. Northmark CEO Victor Hale held a press conference that afternoon at the development site. He said the company had competed fairly and never knowingly sought confidential information. A reporter asked whether anyone at Northmark had received scoring weights. "To my knowledge, no," he said. 20 minutes later the email chain went public. Karen Voss was placed on leave before sunset. Northmark's board then announced it would cooperate with any independent reevaluation of the bid. Laura came to my office that evening. Most of my staff had gone home. She stood in the doorway without an aide. "You released the records," I said. "Yes. Why now?" She looked exhausted. "Because I watched Hale answer that question." "What question?" "Whether Northmark had received the scoring weights. He said he didn't know." She sat across from me. For about 30 seconds, I started planning how to respond without releasing the email. I was going to say the matter was under review and that no conclusion had been reached. And I realized I was doing it again. One more delay. One more carefully accurate sentence that avoided the fact everyone needed. "I keep saying I was protecting Harbor East," she said. "You were." She looked surprised. "That doesn't make what you did right." "No. But the project mattered." "Yes. 600 jobs were real. Affordable housing was real. Years of planning were real." That complexity was exactly why Laura had been able to excuse herself for so long. She had not sacrificed trust for something worthless. She had sacrificed it for something she believed was valuable. That made the choice understandable. It did not make it acceptable. "I thought if the project was good enough, I could repair the process afterward," she said. "And Dad? I treated him like another delay." Her eyes filled. "When you tried to play the video, I treated you like one too." That was the first apology that felt complete because she was no longer asking me to misunderstand what happened. She had not chosen Adrian over me. She had chosen the outcome she had built her political identity around. Adrian simply learned how to use that obsession. Laura said, "I can resign." I shook my head. "If that's what you want. It's not my office. Nathan. Voters, council, investigators, whatever the law requires can decide Mayor Whitaker's future." I looked directly at her. "I'm deciding whether I can still be married to you." Her face changed. "That's worse." Yes. I had expected to feel satisfaction when she understood. I didn't. She asked, "Do you really think I would have let Harbor East close if legal told me the bid was invalid?" I don't know anymore. That was the point. For 11 years I had trusted not only what Laura said but the sequence in which she would choose things when they collided. Family before politics when family was innocent. Truth before optics when the truth became unavoidable. Law before legacy. I no longer knew whether any of those assumptions held. My phone rang after she left. It was one of my largest private clients. They were postponing a $36 million warehouse engineering agreement. Why? Their general counsel hesitated. "Northmark is one of our capital partners. My firm had nothing to do with Harbor East. But my name was now tied to the scandal, and Northmark had apparently asked whether the client still planned to use us." That was the first time Laura's crisis reached my employees. I called Maya. She told me not to react publicly until we knew whether Northmark had actually interfered. A few hours later Adrian's lawyer supplied another complication. He reminded reporters that my firm had once competed for engineering work connected to Harbor East. Technically true. 3 years earlier we had joined a consortium seeking a preliminary transportation design package. We finished fourth and never protested. Dad knew. He had told me at the time, "Corruption didn't make you fourth. Your proposal made you fourth." The old bid had occurred more than a year before the confidential scoring leak. Still, the headline was useful to Adrian. Mayor's husband had business ties to project at center of funeral scandal. His strategy had shifted. He no longer needed people to believe I sent the fake threat. He needed them to believe every person in the scandal had motives, so no evidence could be trusted without an asterisk. Laura called after seeing the story. "I can correct it. Don't make a statement. What do you want?" "Release the procurement file." She did. The city posted the entire old bid record, including my firm's fourth-place score, the date, and the unrelated procurement number. Reporters independently confirmed the bid predated the disputed leak. The story weakened within hours. More importantly, Northmark's Victor Hale called me personally. "We did not ask your client to terminate you. You asked whether they were still using us." "Yes. That's pressure." He did not argue. "Our board has told them we are taking no position on their engineering contractor." The warehouse agreement came back the following day. No dramatic victory. No damages check. My employees simply went back to work. That mattered more. Meanwhile, the consequences around Laura moved into different parts of her life. Harbor East financing remained frozen. 3 council members from her own coalition called for her resignation. The police union criticized using officers for political or personal disputes. Adrian had become openly hostile. Northmark accepted that the original award might be rebid. Laura returned to television less than 48 hours after telling me the project could collapse without immediate financing and watched another city official explain that Harbor East itself could survive even if the current award did not. That realization hurt her more than I expected. The project she had treated as inseparable from her administration did not need her to exist. Another developer could build it. Another mayor could finish it. Stonebridge could keep the housing and jobs without preserving Laura's preferred path to them. That night she texted me. "I understand now why your father wouldn't wait." I did not answer. There was still one part of the funeral I did not understand. The mayor's communications office had been given temporary access to the church's live stream before the service, and someone had attempted to use it before Reverend Cole changed the password. Until we knew why, I was not prepared to believe the police removal had been the first plan. The answer came from Adrian. Not because he wanted to help me. Because his own position was deteriorating. The forensic review of Elise Morgan's screen recording confirmed that the threatening screenshot had been manipulated on Adrian's phone. My carrier data matched the finding. His attorney stopped publicly insisting the message was genuine. Adrian shifted toward cooperation. Through his lawyer, he told outside investigators that the police removal had been Plan B. The first plan, he claimed, involved the church's media system. Maya called me as soon as she learned. Adrian says the mayor's office tried to disable Walter's video remotely the night before the funeral. My stomach tightened. Who? Camille Ross. On Laura's instruction? That's what he says. I called Laura before the claim reached television. She came to Dad's house that night. Her resignation had not happened. Council pressure was building, but she was still mayor. I stayed standing while she sat in the living room. Did you try to remove Dad's video from the church live stream? Laura closed her eyes. Yes. The answer came too quickly to be strategic. Tell me exactly what happened. The night before the funeral, I called Camille and asked whether our temporary media access could prevent Walter's recorded statement from going into the live stream. Did Reverend Cole authorize that? No. Did you ask? No. Because you knew he would refuse. Yes. The pattern was almost painfully clear. When the person with the legitimate authority might say no, Laura looked for a route around the answer. What did you tell Camille? Find out whether the temporary access lets us stop the file from going live. Delete it? No. Alter it? No. Remove it from the planned stream? Yes. Did Camille try? Once. The password had already been changed. Camille called Laura and said the credentials no longer worked. What did you tell her? I told her to stop. No second attempt. No call to the church. I did not immediately believe that part. Laura handed me her phone. The thread was still there. At 11:18 p.m. Do not make another login attempt. Leave the church system alone. We'll handle tomorrow through security if necessary. The first sentence helped her. The second condemned her. She had recognized that remotely interfering with a private funeral program crossed a line, then immediately documented the next route. Security. How did that become police? Adrian showed me the fake screenshot the next morning. Laura stared at Dad's empty chair. I told myself that changed everything. I thought interfering with the live stream was political, but responding to a threat was security. The lieutenant told you my real message wasn't a criminal threat. Yes. You heard him. Yes. And you still ordered me removed. Yes. Adrian had not created her objective. He changed the method she was willing to justify. Maya came over and preserved the message thread. Camille joined briefly by video with her attorney and confirmed the account. Laura asked her to test the temporary access. Camille tried once. When the login failed, Laura told her to stop. The following morning Adrian arrived with the fabricated threat and repeatedly pushed Laura to authorize removal if I insisted on playing Dad's recording. Camille remembered him becoming frustrated when Laura refused another attempt to interfere with the church system. He told her, if you won't stop the video before the service, you need to stop Nathan during it. That made the entire timeline fit. Adrian knew Laura planned to remove him after Harbor East closed. He needed Laura's fingerprints on the suppression so she could not later isolate the scandal around him. Laura wanted the video delayed because the financing mattered more to her than immediate disclosure. Their interests overlapped just long enough. Did you know he was trying to trap you? I asked Laura after Camille disconnected. No. Would it have changed what you did? She thought before answering. I want to say yes. But? I don't know. That was more honest. She had been standing so close to the line that Adrian did not need to move her very far. What happens now? She asked. To the investigation? To us. I sat across from her. I'm filing for divorce. Laura's face seemed to empty. She did not argue immediately. Because of the media access attempt? Because of all of it. I stopped Camille. Then used police instead. I know. You had multiple chances to decide Dad's video was something you had to answer rather than control. Every time, you looked for another way to delay it. She lowered her head. When? Tomorrow. She nodded slowly. Then said something I did not expect. Okay. That's all? No. She wiped her eyes. But I don't want the next month to become me performing remorse until you feel cruel for leaving. For the first time since the funeral, Laura understood that regret did not create an obligation in me. She still asked one question. Do you love me? Yes. The answer hurt both of us. Love had survived the funeral. Trust had not. She left Dad's house shortly before midnight. The next morning I filed. I did not issue a statement about the marriage. Laura did not either. The political consequences accelerated without our help. The police chief publicly confirmed that the lieutenant had questioned the sufficiency of my genuine message before officers removed me. The state bond authority kept Harbor East frozen. Outside counsel obtained the church access thread and the screen recording showing Adrian altering my text. Council leaders scheduled an emergency session. Then the full funeral video was set to air. Channel 8 told me the night before. They had authenticated the copy against the church archive and decided to show the entire relevant sequence rather than another short clip. Laura's office knew too. She called me. I watched the raw file. So have I. I didn't remember you putting the eulogy on the coffin. I looked at the pages on Dad's desk. You were busy. She absorbed that without protest. Then she asked, if I resign, will it change anything between us? No. The word came quickly. Laura was quiet. I thought that was what you'd say. Then don't resign for me. I'm not sure who I'm resigning for anymore. That's a decision you need to make without using me as the answer. She said she understood. At 7 the next morning, I watched the funeral footage from Dad's house with Emily. It began with the coffin, the priest, Laura and Adrian in the front row. Then the ceiling microphone. Has your husband threatened Mr. Locke? He sent messages. The lieutenant answered. That's not a criminal threat. Then Laura's voice. Just get Nathan outside before the video plays. The officers approached. I told her to stop them. She told me to cooperate. Emily stood. My eulogy went on to Dad's coffin. Then Laura gave the order again. Take him outside. The officers took my arms and walked me down the aisle. The network added no music. No commentator spoke over it. They did not need to. The video showed exactly what happened and exactly why. Within an hour, Laura's political support began breaking in public. The deputy mayor called for her resignation. Members of her coalition followed. The police union said officers should not be used to enforce political or private objectives disguised as security concerns. Laura had spent years building a reputation as a disciplined institutional mayor. One unedited sequence showed her abandoning the principle when it became inconvenient. By noon, the question was no longer whether the council would punish her. It was whether Laura would finally make a decision without trying to buy another day. Laura did not resign that morning. She went to work. That decision angered nearly everyone, including people who still supported her. I understood it better than they did. Laura had spent years believing that staying at the desk during a crisis proved strength. Walking away before every fact was fixed felt to her like abandoning the city. But the office itself had become part of the problem. At noon, outside counsel confirmed 3 central facts publicly. Adrian's threatening screenshot had been altered. The police lieutenant had advised that my genuine text was not a criminal threat. Laura had nevertheless instructed security to remove me before Dad's video played. The report also confirmed the attempted church media access had occurred the previous night and stopped after the credentials failed. There was no need for another week of procedural suspense. Those facts changed the political question. Adrian could no longer use Laura as complete cover. Laura could no longer use Adrian as complete explanation. Northmark made its own move. CEO Victor Hale announced the company would accept a full independent rebid of Harbor East rather than litigate to preserve the original award. That decision stripped away Laura's last practical argument for staying. The project did not have to die. It could be delayed, reviewed, and rebuilt through a clean process. Around 2, I saw Laura on television walking through City Hall surrounded by reporters. One shouted, "Mayor, if Harbor East can survive a rebid, what exactly were you protecting at the funeral?" Laura stopped. For a second, I expected the old answer. Jobs. Housing. Financing. Instead she said, "That is a fair question." Then she walked inside. At 3:17 she called me. "I think I finally have an answer." To what? What I was protecting. I waited. Myself. It was not entirely true. The project mattered. I know. Adrian mattered because I thought losing him before financing would make the administration look unstable. Probably. The lenders mattered. Northmark's sunk costs mattered. The jobs mattered. Yes. But somewhere in there I stopped separating the project from the fact that I had promised I would deliver it. There it was. Harbor East had become proof of Laura's competence. If it failed, she failed. If disclosure threatened it, disclosure became the enemy. You turned the city's project into your verdict on yourself. Yes. Dad would have understood that. He had spent his career distrusting people who became unable to distinguish stewardship from ownership. Laura said, "The council president asked me to appear tonight. What will you do?" "I don't know yet." "Then don't ask me." I wasn't going to. That was progress. She asked only whether I planned to attend. "I haven't decided. I'd like you there." "That's different from needing me there." "Yes." Before we ended the call, she said, "Nathan, Adrian manipulating me doesn't change what I did." "No. I need you to know I understand that." "I do." It was the first time she stated responsibility without immediately attaching a reason. At 4, Adrian's attorney confirmed he would admit fabricating the screenshot as part of his cooperation with investigators reviewing Harbor East and the funeral response. He did not confess to every accusation surrounding the procurement process. He maintained that he believed Northmark was already the strongest bidder and described the scoring information as guidance rather than a corrupt payoff. That distinction would matter to whatever legal consequences came later. It no longer mattered much to me. The thing he did to me was clear. He altered my words to make me appear dangerous. The thing Laura did was equally clear. She used that claim, even after being told my real message was not a criminal threat, to justify removing me from Dad's funeral. Maya asked whether I wanted to pursue a separate civil claim against Adrian. "Maybe later." "You don't sound enthusiastic." "I want to finish burying my father first." That answer surprised both of us. The scandal had consumed the funeral so completely that Dad sometimes felt like the evidence source rather than the reason I had been in the church. That evening, Reverend Cole called. "I want to play Walter's video." "Where?" "At First Covenant." "The procurement video?" "Yes." He asked for it to be played there. I looked toward Dad's photograph. "When?" "Tomorrow evening. No ceremony. No political speakers. Do it." Laura learned about it before I told her. She texted, "Please let it play. No city involvement. No request from me." I almost replied that she no longer had the authority to stop it anyway. Then deleted the message. She was trying, belatedly, to leave something alone. At 6, the city council chamber filled for its emergency session. Laura arrived through the secure hallway as mayor. She did not begin with resignation. She began by supplementing the record. "The facts released today require me to say something more precisely than I did in my first statement." The room quieted. She acknowledged asking Camille to test whether the temporary church media access could stop Dad's recording from entering the live stream. When the credentials failed, I told her to stop. That does not make the request acceptable. I authorized an attempt to interfere with a private memorial program because I wanted information delayed. Then she explained the forged screenshot. Adrian Locke presented me with a message I believed was genuine. I relied on it. She paused. But the police lieutenant told me Nathan Whitaker's actual message did not constitute a criminal threat. I heard that assessment before I instructed officers to remove him. The chamber went silent. No one could say she was hiding behind Adrian anymore. I wanted the threat to justify something I already wanted done. That sentence was more damaging than anything her opponents had written. She turned to Harbor East. "I believed preserving the financing served the public. I still believe the project serves the public. What I no longer believe is that my confidence in an outcome entitled me to decide when other people were allowed to know facts that could affect it." Then she did not resign. Not yet. She asked for one night. That caused anger in the room. The council president asked why. Laura answered, "Because I will not make my final decision tonight as another reaction to pressure. I have spent too many days making decisions because I wanted to control what happened next." For once, waiting did not sound like delay. It sounded like she was refusing to use panic as another excuse. The council recessed without a vote. Outside, protesters shouted that she was buying time. Maybe they were right. I drove to First Covenant instead. Reverend Cole had opened the chapel so I could sit alone for a few minutes. Dad's coffin was gone. The aisle looked ordinary again. I stood where the officers first touched me. Then where Laura had stood. The distance between us had been less than 15 feet. It felt much larger now. Reverend Cole joined me. "Do you think she'll resign?" "Yes." "You sound sure." She finally stopped asking what she can save. He nodded toward the altar. "Walter would have said that took long enough." I smiled for the first time all day. The following morning, Laura requested a final public statement before the city council. She also called Maya. Not me. She asked what legal obligations remained if she resigned and whether admitting her own conduct would interfere with ongoing reviews. Maya later told me that Laura did not ask how to minimize liability. She asked how to make the public record complete without prejudging Adrian's separate case. That distinction mattered. At 11, Laura sent me one message. I'm resigning today. I'm not asking you to come, but I wanted you to hear it from me first. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I put on my jacket and drove to City Hall. The council chamber was full before Laura arrived. Emily sat beside me in the back row. I chose the public entrance. No reserved seat for the mayor's husband. No staff escort. By then I was legally still married to Laura, but the role had become meaningless. She entered through the side hallway and walked to the podium. For 6 years, that room had been hers. She had won budget fights there, survived recall petitions there, announced emergency closures there, and once stood for 19 hours during a flood response while half the city lost power. I had been proud of her in that room. That was part of why watching her lose it hurt. The council president said, "Mayor Whitaker, you requested time to make a statement." Laura opened a folder, looked at the first page, then closed it. I did. Her voice was steady. "Before I announce my decision, I want to make the record complete." She repeated the facts without turning the speech into a defense. She had asked her chief of staff to determine whether temporary media access could prevent Dad's video from entering the church live stream. She stopped further attempts after the credentials failed. The next morning Adrian showed her the fabricated screenshot. She believed it. The police lieutenant nevertheless told her my genuine message did not amount to a criminal threat. She still ordered officers to remove me before Dad's video played. I did that because I wanted to delay disclosure until Harbor East financing closed. No reference to a misunderstanding. No claim that police exceeded her wishes. Then she addressed Adrian. Mr. Locke fabricated evidence and used it to influence a security response. That conduct is his responsibility. A pause. My reliance on that evidence does not erase my responsibility for the instruction I gave after an officer told me what Nathan had actually written. Separate lines. Finally. She turned to Harbor East. I signed the financing certification before I knew that Mr. Locke had provided confidential scoring information to Northmark personnel. That timing matters. 2 days later, I learned of the email. I removed Mr. Locke from procurement discussions and asked council to determine whether the leak changed the award. That also matters. Then, what matters most is what I did next. She had not told lenders. She had asked Dad to wait. She had intended to remove Adrian after the closing. She had convinced herself that disclosure could follow the outcome she wanted. I believed I was protecting a public project. Her eyes moved across the council chamber. I was also protecting my own belief that finishing Harbor East would prove I had governed this city well. That was the first time she said the part she had admitted to me on the phone. I stopped distinguishing between stewardship and ownership. Dad would have liked that word. I treated public trust as something I could spend temporarily and restore after the project was secure. She looked toward the police chief. I put officers in an unacceptable position by asking public authority to solve a political problem. Then toward Reverend Cole. I authorized an attempt to interfere with a private funeral program without the church's consent. Then she stopped. For a moment, I thought she would speak directly to me. She didn't. My apology to Nathan Whitaker will remain private. I have already taken enough of his private life into public rooms. Emily gripped my hand. Laura continued. My apology to Walter Whitaker cannot be delivered. Her composure finally broke. He asked me to release records. I treated his insistence as an obstacle. He died before I kept the promise I made him. Several seconds passed before she could speak again. I cannot undo that. She looked at the council president. Effective at midnight, I resign as mayor of Stonebridge. There was no immediate sound. Then cameras began clicking. Laura did not wait for applause or questions. She said Harbor East should continue if a lawful rebid showed it remained viable, and that her resignation should not be used to prejudge employees or officers whose individual conduct remained under separate review. Then she stepped away from the podium. 6 years ended in less than 10 minutes. Outside City Hall, the reaction split exactly as the city had split all week. Some people cheered. Others cried. One woman behind us said, "She was a good mayor." The man beside her answered, "She still did it." Neither statement cancelled the other. Laura left through another door. She did not call me. That evening, Dad's video finally played at First Covenant. The church was nearly full again, but this time there was no coffin. No police. No mayor. Reverend Cole introduced the recording with one sentence. Walter asked that this be heard. Dad appeared on the screen, thinner than I wanted to remember him. He explained the scoring leak, the unanswered questions, and Laura's promise to release the records. Then he said, "Public trust is usually lost in small decisions made by people who believe they can explain them later." I had forgotten that line. The room remained silent after the video ended. No applause. That felt right. Outside, reporters asked whether I believed Laura deserved to lose the office. I gave them the only answer I wanted attached to Dad. He wanted the records released. They're released now. Then I left. The next week was quieter than the previous one. Not quiet. Just no longer mine. Harbor East would be rebid under independent oversight. Northmark could compete only if the reviewing authority allowed it. Adrian's cooperation and the fabricated screenshot remained with investigators. The city acknowledged that officers had lacked an adequate basis to keep me from the private funeral once the real message had been assessed. Maya handled the rest. I stopped attending briefings that did not require me. There were consequences I cared about and procedures I no longer needed to witness. Laura's office was gone. Adrian's city career was over. The project Laura had nearly destroyed herself to preserve would survive in some form without her. My marriage was still waiting for its own ending. Laura did not flood my phone with apologies. She sent 2 practical messages about property and one asking when I wanted to collect several boxes from the mayor's residence. That restraint made everything sadder. 3 weeks after her resignation, we met at Dad's house. She had stored some things in the guest room over the years. Books. A winter coat. Christmas ornaments. Old photographs. Ordinary remains of an 11-year marriage. Laura packed quietly while I sorted Dad's papers in the kitchen. Eventually she came out holding our wedding photograph. Dad stood behind us in the picture with one hand on each of our shoulders. Laura looked at it for a long time. "Do you want this?" "No." She nodded. "Me neither." Neither of us tore it. She slid it between 2 books in her box. History did not need to be destroyed to be over. Before she left, Laura pulled a key from her purse. Dad's spare house key. He had given it to her years ago, for emergencies. She placed it in my hand. I forgot I still had it. That little piece of brass hurt more than the resignation speech. Laura looked around the house. Did he hate me before he died? No. How can you know? Because he kept asking you to release the records. She frowned. If he'd given up on you, he would have stopped asking. Her eyes filled. He still thought I might do the right thing. Yes. And then I made sure he died before I did. No. She looked at me. Cancer did that. I would not give her a guilt that wasn't hers. You delayed the truth. You tried to stop his video. You made me miss his burial. Those are enough. She nodded slowly. That was the responsibility boundary Dad would have insisted on too. Exact facts. No larger accusation needed. Laura picked up the box. At the front door she stopped. "Nathan, can I ask you one last thing?" "Yes." "If I asked you not to divorce me, would it change anything?" "No." The answer hurt, but it did not surprise her. She closed her eyes for a second. "Then I won't ask." Our divorce did not become another public battle. Laura could have delayed it. She didn't. She did not ask me to wait until the city investigations ended, or until Harbor East was rebid, or until the press stopped using our marriage as shorthand for her collapse. For once, she let an outcome happen without trying to control the timing. The legal work was ordinary. Property schedules. Financial disclosures. A few negotiations over accounts and renovations. No children meant there was no custody fight to turn private grief into another institution's problem. Maya handled the pieces that needed handling and compressed the rest into emails I could answer in minutes. That was enough procedure for one life. The city's remaining consequences arrived mostly without me. Outside reviewers confirmed that the funeral removal had no adequate law enforcement basis once officers assessed my genuine message. Adrian formally acknowledged fabricating the screenshot as part of his cooperation. Harbor East's original award was voided and moved toward a clean rebid. The project itself survived. That mattered. Affordable housing did not disappear because Laura resigned. Construction jobs did not need Adrian Locke. Stonebridge did not collapse because one mayor lost office. The thing Laura had believed only she could protect proved capable of continuing without her. I never needed to watch every remaining meeting to understand that. My private settlement with the city was modest and mostly practical: reimbursement of documented legal costs and an acknowledgement of what had happened at the church. I did not want a fortune for missing Dad's burial. There was no number that made that transaction make sense. A month after Laura left Dad's house with her boxes, the divorce agreement was ready. We met once more to sign the final personal documents before our attorneys completed the filing. Not at City Hall. Not at Maya's office. At Dad's house again. Laura arrived in jeans and a gray coat. For years I had seen her in tailored suits so often that ordinary clothes made her look younger. Or maybe simply less protected. I made coffee. She accepted a cup and sat at the kitchen table. The same table where Dad had argued with both of us about Harbor East months earlier. For a while we reviewed practical details. The house remained mine. Laura kept her retirement accounts. We divided savings according to the agreement. She had already moved permanently out of the mayor's residence into a rented apartment downtown. No one raised his voice. When we finished, Laura looked toward Dad's empty chair. I keep thinking about the funeral. So do I. Not the video. What part? You asking me to tell them to let go. I remembered her face. She remembered mine. I could have ended it right there, she said. Yes. One sentence. Yes. I kept thinking I had already gone too far to stop. That was a familiar kind of failure. Once people invested enough in a bad decision, reversing course began to feel more expensive than continuing. Laura had built a political career around making difficult choices. Eventually that skill turned against her. She became too confident that moving forward was always stronger than admitting the direction itself was wrong. I'm sorry you missed the burial. Her voice was steady until the last word. That was the apology beneath every investigation, every email, every resignation headline. She had taken something from me no court could restore. I know. She waited, but I did not say I forgave her. I did not want to lie just because she had finally stopped. Laura nodded as if she understood. I used to think if I lost enough, maybe eventually it would balance. What do you mean? The office. My career. You. I thought there would be some point where the punishment became large enough that you could look at me and say we were even. There isn't. I know that now. She looked down at her coffee. You weren't waiting for me to suffer enough. No. You were waiting to see whether you could trust me again. Yes. And you couldn't. I did not soften it. No. Tears gathered in her eyes, but she did not ask me to reconsider. That was the difference between regret and bargaining. For the first days after the funeral, every consequence had made Laura search for the decision that would stop the next one. Suspend Adrian. Release records. Delegate authority. Resign. Apologize. Eventually she understood that our marriage was not another crisis she could stabilize through the correct sequence of actions. Some damage does not become reversible because the person who caused it finally understands it. She stood and carried her coffee cup to the sink out of habit. For a second, the movement was so ordinary that I could see 11 years at once: Sunday mornings, campaign nights, Dad arriving without knocking, Laura reading council packets at this table while I complained she was using my good pen. Then she placed the cup beside the sink instead of washing it. She no longer lived here. That tiny hesitation ended the memory. Laura picked up her coat. At the door she said, I loved being mayor. I know. I think I started believing that because I was good at the job, my instincts deserved more trust than the rules around me. That happens to people with power. I used to think I was different. Most people who become dangerous with power probably do. She gave me a sad smile. Your father would have enjoyed that sentence. He would have made it shorter. That made both of us laugh. The first time we had laughed together since he died. It lasted only a few seconds. That was enough. Laura reached for the doorknob, then stopped. I don't know what I'm going to do next. I almost told her she would figure it out. Instead I said, you don't have to know yet. For 6 years every answer she gave had needed to sound certain. Now uncertainty belonged only to her. She stepped onto the porch. No cameras waited outside. No city vehicle. No police detail. Just her car parked beneath Dad's maple tree. Nathan. I looked at her. I am sorry. I know. This time that was enough. Laura walked down the steps and drove away. I watched until the taillights disappeared at the corner, then closed the door. Dad's spare key was still in my hand. I had carried it around for weeks without noticing. I walked into the kitchen and hung it on the small brass hook beside the pantry. It had been there for 15 years before Laura borrowed it. Now it was back. The final divorce order arrived later without ceremony. So did the city's announcement that Harbor East would proceed under a new procurement. I read both once and closed the emails. Dad had never asked for Laura's career to end. He had never asked for Adrian to be ruined. He had asked for records. He wanted people to know how a bidder received information the others did not have, and he wanted the city to answer before it committed itself further. Laura could have survived that question. What she could not survive was what she did to avoid answering it. She delayed disclosure until after a financing deadline. She planned to remove the advisor afterward. She authorized an attempt to interfere with Dad's memorial video. When that failed, she accepted a fabricated threat because it gave her another path. Then, after a police lieutenant told her my actual message was not a criminal threat, she still said, "Just get Nathan outside before the video plays." That sentence became public because a church microphone was already recording. The same recording showed what followed: officers taking my arms, my eulogy going onto Dad's coffin, Laura watching while I was removed from the funeral she wanted kept under control. People later called it the video that ended her political career. They were right, but the camera did not create anything. It preserved a decision. That was why Laura could never blame the press, Adrian, the police, or me for what people saw. Adrian had forged evidence. He answered for that. The officers acted on incomplete information. Their department answered for that. Laura made the order. She answered for that. And I finally stopped needing anything more from her. No greater punishment. No public humiliation. No final speech that made the marriage worth saving. Dad's house became quiet again. One evening I found the eulogy I had never delivered lying on his desk. The pages were still creased where I had folded them. I read them alone. Most of it was embarrassingly sentimental. Dad would have complained. At the bottom, I had written a final paragraph I never got to say in the chapel. My father believed rules mattered most when breaking them would make life easier. He said character was just the decision you made when you already knew how to explain the other one. I sat at his kitchen table for a long time after reading it. Then I placed the eulogy beside the photograph Emily had chosen for the funeral. The house key hung on its old hook. Dad's video had been played. The records had been released. Laura had finally told the truth before knowing whether it could save anything. It could not save the office. It could not save our marriage. But for the first time since the funeral, nothing was waiting to be hidden, delayed, or explained tomorrow. That was enough. That's all for today. Remember to subscribe and support us.